This is one of my most anticipated movies for the year, just because of course, I love The Babadook, but I actually do own the actual book of The Babadook. So you can quite imagine how excited I was for The Nightingale. What's going on, everyone? Welcome to a brand new movie review. Today I'm going to be discussing Jennifer Kent's brand new film, The Nightingale. This is one of my most anticipated films of the year due to the fact that, again, I love The Babadook. It's one of my favorite movies ever made, and it really made me fall in love with the horror genre more than I ever thought I could. Due to the fact that before I had seen it, I kind of just felt like the horror genre was a weak, garbage genre that would just throw jump scares out in front of you, but never had a lot of substance to it, and The Babadook opened my eyes to a whole new genre. And ever since then, the horror genre has actually been one of my favorites. And within The Nightingale, while this isn't a straightforward horror film, it does have a lot of horror tendencies to it. Most of all is a more of an adventure drama that has a lot of thrilling aspects to it, that has a lot more to say than I think most people will understand. If you guys are excited for this movie, make sure to comment down below. Let me know how excited you guys are. Were you guys a fan of The Babadook? Were you guys a fan of the trailer? Let's talk about it. I can definitely say about The Nightingale, it is raw, brutal, bloody, and it feels real. Jennifer Kent writes and directs a film that feels so passionate but also so real that it's a great sophomore effort from her. And really the performances are one of the strongest parts about this film. They're all, again, the biggest way that you can describe this film is saying that word, real. It puts you into the scenario of these characters, makes you feel like you are truly there with everyone that's going on, and every single moment that happens in here, you feel very uncomfortable with a lot of the different moments that kind of set up this whole story. Speaking of the stories, this is set in 1825, where Clare, a young Irish convict woman, chases a British officer through the rugged wilderness, bent on revenge for a terrible act of violence that was committed against her. On the way there, she enlists the services of a tracker named Billy, who is also marked by trauma from his own violence-filled past. Definitely a movie that Jennifer Kent has a lot to say about it, especially back in this time period, where you can definitely tell that she's really going into how these British officers were treating many people within this country. And it's very harsh, but again, it goes into it in such a passionate way that it's not just remembering back to this history of how brutal it was, but it also goes to our society and how a lot of people treat women and how people treat others, different races, just people in general who are different than us, and how brutal at times we can be against other people, which is just despicable. I wait till the movie comes on home video so I can sit there and I can binge it and I can just sit there and analyze every single moment and scene in here, because Jennifer Kent has such subtle nuances that she puts into each and every one of her films, especially with inside The Nightingale, where you're sitting there and you're like, oh my god, there's probably more to this. And just like within The Babadook I've watched countless times and really dived into and kind of getting to understand every single thing about it, whether it's the ending, whether it's the middle of the story, whether it's some of the characters, and there's so much to The Nightingale that I can't wait to dive into as well. The film, again, might not be a horror movie, but it contains those horror elements that are so unnervingly and genuinely terrifying, especially when it comes to Sam Claflin, who plays the main British officer in here. He is despicable. He is one of the, literally an actor who, talk about someone that you've never really seen do much. We've seen him have chops, but this is one of the series where I'm like, he was almost unrecognizable with how despicable and disgusting he was as this main character. Aisling Franciosi, who plays Clare in here, the main protagonist, she is wonderful. There comes a point in the story where you're kind of understanding her, and she's very, again, she's kind of subtle, she's just this quiet girl, but there comes a point where really her character arc just shifted. Very dramatically and jarring, but it made sense. And it kind of just, again, shows how the human mind and the human psyche kind of works in that manner. And she does wonders with this. You felt so much for her character, so many different emotional moments that she kind of dives into her character. And really, by the end of the story, I was so engaged with her emotionally, but also understanding her story. And again, feeling like I was with the journey. Baykali Ganambarr, who plays Billy, is again one of the big standouts as well. Being really the only other character that interacts with Clare throughout the whole entire story, there's a lot more to him, and again, it takes Jennifer Kent's subtle nuances to really open these characters up to a wider audience and kind of really get you to understand what they're going through. It has a lot of strong things to say about Australia history and how certain people were treated. This film doesn't just take us into a deep dive into the society, but also into our our society today, like I was mentioning. Definitely this movie will not be for everyone. This is, again, a very brutal movie. When I say brutal, it is extremely graphic at times, sometimes to the point where it was very hard for even me to watch, and I've seen a lot of things. It doesn't steer away from not showing that detail. She doesn't want to. She wants to show every despicable thing and every brutal moment, every disgusting aspect of society and just in general of humanity. It's really not having the use of a score really just adds to the sounds and helps you place you into this world so uniquely. Really, the only really small con that I could personally have for the film is I felt that it was a little bit too long. And there are a couple segments in here where I feel like you could have trimmed it up. A lot of it is just them walking, and a lot of it is just that in general. There's a lot of talking in between, but there is some moments where I was like, you could have cut that part out. You probably could have cut this out and made it more for a tightened aspect of the story. But again, it's hard for me to even go and say that's a con. I think some people will have a lot more issues than I will of that aspect, and some people won't like how much of a despicable and just disgusting stuff that Kent really shows and shoves on screen. But I appreciate when a film doesn't steer away from that aspect. Before I give you guys my final thoughts on this movie, make sure to slap that like and subscribe button where I give you guys tons of early movie reviews like this on a daily basis, and plus you guys can also go over to Sandwich on Films on how to see films early, and of course, big round of applause for all my Patreon supporters, because without them, I wouldn't be able to do this. Nightingale comes out very much soon, around August 30th. I felt so engrossed in every little second within this movie, and that I could not take my eyes off the screen. I can't wait to rewatch this one and see a deep dive into all the small elements that this film contains. Kent has an eye for all that detail, and within that, and even the Babadook, I cannot wait to see what she does next, and hopefully I don't have to wait as long to see her next directorial effort, because she is one of the best directors working today, and especially one of the best writers. She brings and gets some of the best performances in some of these films of the year, and especially within this year in general. The Nightingale is truly a movie that is hard to watch, but is one that I think many people should definitely see. It ends on one of the most beautiful last shots of the year as well. It's beautifully shot. It has a wonderful sound to it all, and it really is, while it's a hard film to watch, it is a brutal, realistic look on the human psyche. There is so much to the Nightingale to appreciate. So with all that said, I'm going to give the Nightingale an A. Know what your guys' thoughts are on the Nightingale. Do you guys like it? Do you hate it? Let's talk about it down below in the comments. I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on this one. Thank you guys again so much for watching this, and of course, until next time, stay classy.